Every kid who's ever picked up a basketball has dreamed of running out of that tunnel in Carolina blue. A lot of people let that dream fade. A rare few chase it, and an even smaller number actually live it. Today on Inside Carolina, we're talking to someone who did all three. Jackson Watkins didn't take the easy path to Carolina basketball. He took the long one, the one that was filled with doubt and sweat and every reason to quit. But instead, he turned that journey into something bigger, a story worth telling, and now a book worth reading. His new release, Dream On, isn't just about basketball. It's about belief, grit, gratitude, and the power of saying yes when life keeps giving you a dozen reasons to say no. I'm Joey Powell. This is Inside Carolina, and today we're diving into what it really takes to chase a dream all the way to the Smith Center floor. What is up, y'all? Joey Powell here for Inside Carolina. You're probably used to hearing us do coast to coast shows. We've got a really, really special thing to do today. As we record this, it is Black Friday. Hope you all had a phenomenal Thanksgiving, that your tryptophan comas have worn off. And if you're vegging out watching some football or whatever, as we record this, I'm going to tell you I've got a great idea for your Christmas presents for that Tar Heel fan in your life. First off, we're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirts, so that's one option. But I'm getting ready to give you a second one because we're going to talk with Jackson Watkins. You know him, you love him, you recognize him from being a member of the Tar Heel basketball team. Jackson finished school in 2022-23 season. Jackson, how the hell are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joey. Great to be on the show, and that was a hell of an intro. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun today. I meant what I said in the intro. Like, you've lived what a lot of Carolina fans dream about. Anybody that's ever touched the ball thinks about, hitting that jumper, and some of them even just stop at just the idea of an ambiguous shot on the floor of the Smith Center. So let's kind of start with why you're here. You've got a book that you've been working on for quite some time. I think it's a hell of a story. But it's called Dream On: From Backyard to Biscuits, a Tar Heel basketball tale. And for the folks that are listening to us or watching us, I'll have that link available when you check this out. So it'll be in the comments and in the details of the show, and you can pre-order it on Shopify, and it'll come to you relatively soon. But Jackson, first things first, how did you get this? I don't know, what made you want to write a book? Because I think everybody talks about it, but very few people be about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it really comes down to what you said first, about everybody being a little kid, dreaming of one day either playing on a big stage or hitting a big time shot. And that was definitely true for me. I grew up in Austin, Texas. And even though, we were pretty far from North Carolina, my mom is a proud alum, and she raised me as a true diehard Tar Heel. She'd let me stay up late and watch all the games. And for as long as I can remember, I was glued to the TV watching Carolina hoops. And it was always a dream of mine to wear that jersey and play in the Smith Center. So that is really what inspired me to write it, because I sort of realized that dream. And to your point, it was a winding path. It was never straightforward. And I felt like I could share my story and hopefully inspire, a kid playing basketball just like me, or anybody else chasing a similar dream or vision. So that's really what inspired me to write the book. And I think how I made it happen was just sitting down for an hour at a time and just like reflecting as much as I could on my experience post-graduation. So it definitely took a while, like you said, but it came together.
Let's dig into some of those, I guess, experiences as you're recollecting and, I guess, considering what goes from lived experience in your mind to making the pages of a book. You mentioned that you grew up in Texas, then you ended up in Richmond. You played high school ball against Armando Bacot, whom everybody knows. Recruited as a Division III athlete, which I've always said, if you can be recruited to get a scholarship to play anywhere, you're doing all right. Explain to us a little bit about how that path evolved, and did you know, playing against Armando in Richmond, that eventually there would be another link up there down the road?
Yeah, had no idea on that front. But I think, after I made the move from Texas to Richmond, that's really when basketball started getting serious for me. And I started working out with one of my old coaches, Matt Muir, who played Division I ball at VMI. And he was really my first true trainer, and he put a lot of faith in me, instilled a lot of, work ethic and commitment and discipline into my life. And I sort of just carried that into my high school career. And once I got to high school, I started playing for Coach Del Harris, who had a lot of coaching experience at the next level, across D1 all the way to D3. He coached at Vassar College up in New York. So he knew a lot of college coaches. He knew what it took to play at the next level. And as I sort of started in high school, that became my goal. Obviously, it was always in the back of my mind, the dream of playing at North Carolina. But, I wasn't Mondo. I wasn't getting recruited freshman and sophomore year to all these powerhouses. It was more so the Division III route. So as I sort of went down my college option process, there was always sort of a twofold path where, I could go play Division III at a small school. Among schools that recruited me were like Swarthmore in Pennsylvania, Carnegie Mellon, sort of these high academic schools. MIT was probably the front runner because it was a larger school, and obviously.
Hold on. Stop. I'm going to step on you immediately. First off, I knew you were an all ACC guy. I knew you were some brains around the locker room, but you just dropped Carnegie Mellon and MIT like it was just no big deal. Like you're hanging out with Johnny Hopkins and, just just doing all of the things. I didn't realize you were that smart of a guy. That's impressive.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. I didn't get in, but it's actually funny. They have to recruit so many kids out of high school because so few get in. That actually Rob Landry and Dewey Ferris, who I eventually got pulled up to varsity with, they were also recruited by MIT. So like maybe in an alternate universe, the Biscuit Boys were playing at MIT. But yeah, those are sort of my options on the Division III side. And then there's always sort of the back of my mind, like, okay, the other option would be go to a UNC, go to a UVA, Boston College, and just, have a typical big university experience. And then, I had some connections to UVA just from playing in Richmond. There could have been a walk-on spot potentially, but I surely couldn't bet on it. And sort of the same with UNC. So I ended up going the big university route and taking a leap of faith to go to Carolina without, the odds were definitely stacked against me for getting a walk-on spot, but it worked out in the end.
I mean, I think most folks, and I graduated from UNC many, many moons ago, but I think most folks who go undergrad at Carolina understand but probably don't know the intricacies of how the walk-on tryout process works. I would imagine that is probably not the, show up, shoot for 2 hours, either on the team or you're not. It seems to me that there's probably a good bit of a grind that's associated with, okay, are you going to play JV? Or are you going to play at all? Are you going to make the varsity squad? Give us the lowdown about what that tryout process was like, because that's something I think could really quickly separates the folks who have the dream and the folks who are actually going to start following that path.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. And as I describe my path now, it seems very simple, sort of looking back at it. But honestly, coming in my freshman year to UNC, it was, anything but straightforward. Growing up, sort of to go back to being a fan and all that, like I'm sure a lot of Carolina fans know about our JV program. So obviously, when I was in high school, I was aware of the JV program and the pipeline to varsity walk on. So was definitely aware, and that sort of factored into my decision process. Like if I'm going to UNC, I'm definitely going to try out for the JV team, hopefully walk on. But as soon as I got to Carolina, I actually ran into one of the assistant coaches on the women's team, Coach Tim Taylor, and I had played against his son in high school. So he went to a rival high school in Charlottesville, and we had played against each other growing up. And I ran into him on like one of the first times I was on campus, and he was like, "Hey, before JV tryouts, like, why don't you come help the women's scout team out?" I was like, "Sure, like anything to stay around the programs, not just be like rolling it out, playing pickup." So I actually technically started my Carolina career on the women's team, playing, with the scout team, helping them prepare for games and whatnot. And then a few months into my freshman year, that's when JV tryouts rolled around. And I mean, I've always known it was going to be competitive. You had, I'd say, 12 returners coming back, so there were only a handful of spots for freshmen. And I think it was like a 2 or 3 day initial tryout with, I think, like 50 or 60 kids. And then after that, it got whittled down to maybe 20. And then we basically did a week of practice and then cut it to a final team after that. And fortunately, I played well enough in that tryout period and shot the ball because that was my specialty. And honestly, to go back to playing against Mondo, like, he was definitely a supporter through that process. When you come in, it can sometimes be hard to differentiate yourself in that big of a tryout. But, I think I remember him and Leaky and some of the other guys just stopping by to watch the tryouts. And I remember Mondo, in Coach Fred's ear, telling him that he had played against me and stuff like that. So he was definitely a big supporter. And, I was fortunate to be one of 3 freshmen to make the JV team that freshman year. So it was me, Rob, and Dewey.
Help people understand, when you're cutting an open tryout on campus, maybe everybody in that first 60 aren't great players. They were probably good in high school. But when you get to that last 20, those guys that are getting cut probably could have played in a lot of places in America. Maybe not starting roles, maybe not major contributors, but they could have played they could have been rostered on a lot of other schools in the country. Explain the difference in that, and seeing guys that are good ball players kind of get the cut.
Yeah, and I mean, there were a lot of me's out there, like a lot of people who had the Division III option or even Division II options. I mean, even there were probably a few that had, small Division I offers, but decided to come to Carolina to, again, chase that dream, to go to the dream school, be part of a big university. So it was super competitive. And I really realized that basically as soon as the first tryout started. Guys were, I was used to playing against really good teams from Richmond and in AAU, but like it was, again, a different level, because you're also playing against, 20, 21-year-olds as a 17, 18-year-old. So it's like that college difference, but also people are big, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 kids at the school. You're bound to have some athleticism and height. So it was a big step up, but I definitely think I sort of adapted pretty quickly and was in the starting lineup before the first game. So I was pretty proud of myself for taking that big step my freshman year. And it was also just a ton of fun to play with sort of a new family on campus.
Tell people about the JV experience. A little bit later, I want to talk about kind of that JV program going away, but help folks understand what the real JV experience is like. Because I think people hear these very wistful, fun stories from guys that have either coached the team or varsity players seeing the JV team or understanding it. But I don't think guys that have played JV really get a chance to talk very often about what that's like. Tell us, who do you play against? What is the practice grind like? But also separate some of these misnomers about, you guys don't get the gear that the varsity squad gets. You don't have the amazing locker rooms. You don't travel first class all the time. Help people understand what that's like. And then when we start talking about when you made varsity, you can kind of make those big comparisons about the differences between the two.
Yeah, that's a really funny point. So just to level set, the JV team has been around for decades. I think back when Coach Smith was coaching at UNC, and it's been a staple of Carolina basketball to not only prepare players for potential, varsity pipeline type of roles, but also just to instill sort of the motto of play hard, play smart, play together at the JV level, and just create great men as well as basketball players. So that's sort of the essence of the JV program. And in terms of what it looked like day to day, we played all our games in the Smith Center, except for one. We had one road game, but basically we would play all of our games 3 hours before varsity tip, which was pretty awesome. Even though there were probably 50 people at most in the stands of 22,000. Again, it was all a bunch of Carolina diehards, and we loved running out of the tunnel with North Carolina on our chest. So it was that same experience, just not quite at the Division I, obviously, level. But we would play community colleges, D3 programs. The best teams we played were high school prep teams. So we played
Yep. Like Hargrave, Oak Hill, those.
Yeah, and we played Rob Dillingham my freshman year, who's now an
Oh
NBA
yeah.
stud. So he dropped 35 on me. Not proud of that one, but yeah, I mean that was a really cool experience, and I mean we were pretty good too. Like I'd say we won most games, but some of those high school prep teams were legit. So, but it was good. And then to your point about sort of the comparison, like we practiced nearly as much as varsity, but we didn't lift. Like we sort of lifted on our own, and then we played our games, all the home games, before their home
Mhm.
games. But then our locker room was sort of in the back hallway, separate locker room. you know, they were the old locker room. It's basically like a visitor locker room, but still, you're in the building, you're playing on the court, you're wearing the jersey, so that's what matters to us.
So tell everybody what it's like and what the process is for how guys go from JV to varsity. Again, I think most diehards understand that, every so often if there's a couple of scholarships available, a guy gets bumped up. But help us understand from being in that process what it looked like for you and then how it materialized.
Yeah, and it looks different for everybody. I mean, if you look at a guy like Kane Ma from when I was in high school, I remember watching him. He sort of uh, practiced for like a summer and then didn't get called up and then came back like middle of the season, I believe. So everybody sort of has a different story. And sometimes it depends on, what the varsity team needs. Like say a few point guards get hurt, you need an extra body. That's when somebody like me would get pulled up, you know, say a team is missing some big guys, that's when a bigger guy like Dewey might get pulled up. And, that's what happened when he got pulled up sophomore year. So it really depends. But I think first off, you sort of got to be a standout on the JV team. You got to be a leader in that sense and sort of fit the mold of being willing and able to contribute in any way. And then I think you also have to be proactive in showing your interest to walk on. Like I remember once COVID hit, so I finished my JV freshman year. My sophomore year is basically doing nothing but the women's team because the JV team was cut off during COVID. But over that period, I was texting Coach Fred, who had coached me on JV, like if you need an extra body for varsity, like let me know. Would love to help out.
Hey, I'm
Like,
I'm going to be around the Smith Center today later. I know you guys are playing. You guys are playing Bradley. If you need a guy,
yeah, like literally, it was like that. And over the summer, it was like literally, anything I can do to help out, even if you need a dummy cone to just stand there, like let me know. And fortunately, I also played with Jackie Manuel on the women's team. Like he was helping
yeah.
out on the women's staff that sophomore year, and then he moved over to the men's staff to start my junior year. So I was also texting him, if you need if you need anybody, let me know. Like I'm trying to walk on.
Hey,
And
hustle never sleeps,
eventually,
man.
exactly. You got to let people know because they're never going to assume. I like to say, like, people are never going to assume your aspirations. So I
Yeah,
had to, like,
that's a great
make
point.
it clear. Yeah, I wanted to make it clear, like, I was, willing to do a lot to walk on. And then once my junior year started, it was announced that there would be no JV season again, which really sucked because my freshman year experience was awesome. It really made my
Yeah.
freshman year. But they announced, no JV, but we're going to have this open varsity walk-on tryout. And I was like, at this point, I'm halfway through college. My hoop dreams are dwindling. And I was like, okay, well, this is my make or break moment. It's either going to happen now or never. And sort of similar to the JV tryout, you had about 50 people show up. Some
Mhm.
were very unqualified. Some, knew how to hoop. But fortunately, both Rob Landry and I, who had played JV together, we knew the coaches, we knew a lot of the players, and leading up to that tryout, we grinded hard. We were running sprints in Will and Gym. We were getting shots up. We were doing full court one-on-one drills. Like we were going hard because we knew this was basically it. And fortunately, we played well in that tryout. And then the next day, Coach Fred calls me. I remember it like it was yesterday because I was sitting at my desk in the morning and he called me, and my heart started racing immediately. And he was like, "Hey,
Did you
like
know when he called that he was going to tell you, or did did
I
you, did
thought it
you
was
were you
gonna
kind of on the
be."
fence?
I thought it was going to be something good just because the
Okay.
tryout had been the night before. And he was like, "Hey, like you played great yesterday. Why don't you come watch practice today and tomorrow?" and then you'll jump into practice on Friday. And I was like, wait, jump into practice. Like, that was in my head. And my heart was going 100 miles an hour, but I was like, yeah, like absolutely. So Rob and I came and watched varsity practice for the next 2 days. And at that point I was like, just trying to contextualize the speed and
Yeah.
the size of everybody on top of like trying to learn the plays. So it was a lot, but that's sort of what initiated that 10-day varsity tryout.
So most everybody has seen the movie Rudy. Who was your first phone call once you found out that that you were gonna quote jump into practice? What does that sound like? Who do you call? Tell me, kind of walk me through the emotions of that process.
Yeah, it was probably my mom, honestly, because like she's been with me every step of the way and sort of inspired me to chase that dream, no matter how bleak it may have looked. And obviously, a Carolina alum, like she really made me the diehard I am. So it was probably her, and then my dad, and my high school coach as well. But then, of course, at that point, it's like, okay, great, I'm trying out, but like, I don't know if there's one spot, two spots, 0 spots, who knows? So it was still really up in the air. I just knew I was going to try, as hard as I could
When
to
Let me
hustle.
take it a step further. When did you know you were on the team? I think that's probably the big win.
Yeah.
Like that's probably the
Yeah,
big aha
exactly.
moment.
Yeah. So we jump into practice that Friday. We spend basically a week and a half jumping into practice, going to the football games with the team. And I'm saying we as in Rob and I, because we were sort of step in this process.
Right.
Um, and we were, I mean, they put us in the JV locker room before and after practice. Like we were not.
You don't get it yet, rookie. You're still not one
Yeah.
of us just yet.
Well, what's even crazier is that they gave us both the number 15 practice jersey. So we were both out there rocking number 15, and we had played together, and we were now working out together and trying out together. But the whole time we're like, is one of us like gonna get cut?
Yeah,
um,
that's weird.
yeah, but yeah, so we didn't lift with the team. We didn't shower with the team. We didn't like hang out in the locker room. It was really just like show up at this team or at this time at this place, and you're gonna join practice, and then you'll go off and do your thing. They made us do our own laundry with like our practice gear. It was it was a pretty difficult 10 days just from like a mental standpoint, like not knowing sort of where we stood in the tryout process. But I think we both did a good enough job that one Thursday rolled around where the team would be flying down to Florida to scrimmage Florida in a preseason scrimmage. And they were handing out itineraries. Hoots was like handing out papers, and Coach Fred sort of pulls Rob and I aside under one of the main baskets, and Coach Davis is there. And I can sort of feel eyeballs from like guys who were interested in, figuring out if we were on the team or not. So like Dewey, I saw him sort of staring over, and Will Lamb, Will
Guys trying
Lamb
to
was
eavesdrop on what's happening. I got you.
yeah, yeah, and then Will Lamb, he was a JV manager that became a varsity manager. I could see him sort of over Coach Davis's shoulder, and Coach Davis said, we've really enjoyed you guys over the last few weeks, and you've done a really great job. We'd love if you would stick around if you want to. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to.
Hold on,
But
coach.
I
Let me
was
think about it for a little
yeah,
while.
let me get back to you.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, like absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. And in that moment, it didn't really hit me in that moment. Obviously, I loved to hear it, and it was awesome and validating, and was sort of a culmination of really my whole life. But it really hit me later that night when, I called my mom. Actually, my mom was in town, so she like swung by for some reason, and I told her, and she like freaked out, and she was having a ball. And then I called my
That had to be
dad.
the best hug of your life, right?
It was a bear hug. She tackled me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want the newest member of the basketball team to be put out of commission, so I tried to stay upright. But and then I called my dad. But it really, like, it truly did not hit me until I called my high school coach, who had been instrumental in my development, not just as a player, but as a person. And he said something that I'll remember for the rest of my life, which is in the book too. But he said it's very rare that anybody gets to live out their childhood dream, and you're getting to do just that. And I think that message really hit me hard, and it really put into perspective, like, this is a very unique opportunity. So, over the next 2 years, I'm going to soak up as much as I can, because this is truly a special opportunity.
Yeah, we're talking with Jackson Watkins. He has a book out now because he's telling you all of the things that kind of prompted him to write this book. But the book is called "Dream On: From Backyard to Biscuits: A Tar Heel Basketball Tale." Again, he's kind of laying out for y'all that he got the chance to live what hundreds of thousands of kids have dreamt at some point in their life. All right, so you're officially on the team. I mean, they could have strung this out and kind of wait until they were on the tarmac heading to Gainesville to play Florida and like told you guys, oh, by the way, go grab your bags and like chase the plane down and maybe we'll let you stick around. But at least they told you ahead of time that you're going to be, you're going to be on the squad. So now you're officially on the team. You are a walk-on. What's the difference in practice for a walk-on JV versus practice? I mean, for a walk-on varsity versus practice for JV when you're actually playing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot different, going from being a starter, running through offensive sets as a first five, scoring option, to essentially being a practice player where you're going to sub in wherever you can be helpful and essentially bring as much energy, effort, and enthusiasm as possible around the clock. And it was really tough at first, sort of understanding that dynamic of like learning when to plug in and when to sub in and when to sort of let the starters or let the scholarship guys get tired. As weird as that may sound, but I'll give you an example. There was one time in a preseason practice where this is my senior year. So Seth Trimble was a freshman, and we were doing this tough transition drill, and he was going hard. And you know him; he's a freak athlete, so he was flying around, and I could tell he was getting tired. So I sort of gave him the signal, like, you just let me know when you need one. And by one, it's like literally 1 or 2 reps, and I'll come get you. And so, the whistle blows and he sort of looks over to me and gives me the nod. And I'm like, okay, like now's my go time. I'm going to try and survive for a couple reps. And so I run onto the floor, give him a high five, and he runs off. And we're setting up. We're about to start the next rep. And I hear the whistle blow. And as soon as the whistle blew, I knew exactly what was coming. Coach Davis had just blown his whistle, and he was like, and this is again preseason, so everybody's fighting for minutes, trying to break into the rotation. And Seth's a freshman. He's like, raise your hand if you want playing time here. Obviously rhetorical, and everybody raises their hand. I raised my hand. The walk-ons did, and he's like, okay, well, how can I expect to play you if you're going to be taking reps off? And this is talking directly to Seth. Even though he had been playing the whole time, this was like my first time subbing in. I was like, of course, there's 1 rep. And I'm like, and so he's like, Seth, like, how can I expect to play you if you're going to be taking reps off? So of course I started jogging right back to the sideline and returned the high five, and Seth got right back in there. That's just like a small story of like, sometimes it's hard to know exactly, how to sub in and whatnot, but that's something I learned as a walk-on. With time, you sort of understand your role.
How do you, and this would be I'm going to try not to cite Rudy the entire show, but how do you make it a point that you're fulfilling what's required of you, like you mentioned earlier, with the energy and kind of that grittiness and that you've got to have an extra level of want to, more so than the varsity guy. I mean, than the starters that are playing.
Yeah.
What does that look like, right? Because you think about in Rudy where he pisses a lot of the starters off because he's bouncing up. He wants every single rep. He's almost brown nosing his way to exile from the team. But you've got to give that energy, and you don't want to upset the dynamic of the guys that you're sharing a locker room with. How did you navigate that? Because that's just such a weird, it's just a weird potential catch-22 for guys, especially at 21 years old.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Honestly, I think one of the ways that I tried to approach it was just by being a pure source of light and energy. And I think especially during like the, I don't want to say like boring parts of practice, but sort of the individual skill development where, like, let's be honest, like you can take reps off there where it's not live. It's not like the coaches are watching every single move. Like, you're going through drills to get warm, get ready for practice. I think bringing 100% effort, a lot of energy, clapping, yelling, like trying to keep the energy up during those moments as well as get better myself because I can like go hard and stuff during those drills. I think that was like a good way to start practice by, keeping the energy up. You're involved in every play, even as a walk on, like the whole team is involved. A lot of times we're doing like full court layups for conditioning, like getting everybody lit and having fun there. That was an easy one. And then I think during sort of the middle parts of practice where we're doing more like strategy stuff, both offensively and defensively, I think it is really like practicing my role during games of like hyping up the bench on the sideline. So we would be like on the sideline, cheering for guys, calling out actions and stuff like that. And then obviously subbing in whenever necessary. But I think the third way that we really got our guys better was during our scout sessions. So once we were in season, most of our practices were split between, the walk-ons or the blue team, formerly known as Blue Steel back in the day. That became the Biscuit Boys, but we split more along those lines where the walk-ons would become the scout team, and we would get a lot of reps on the offensive side because we're trying to prepare our guys on the defensive side. So in those cases, given we're more undersized, we're less athletic, we can really like use our IQ to pick them apart at times. So I think like bringing an edge, I like to sort of think about like once we got into scout, we were sort of the villains. Like we were if we had a good practice, that meant the team had a bad practice.
Somebody's running. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever have one of those moments where one of the starters or, one of the guys that was the blue chip, player, the preeminent player on the roster? Did you ever have one of those moments where they checked you? They just kind of like, all right, stay in your lane, Jackson. You're still just our scout team guy. Stay in your lane. Did you ever get one of those?
I can't remember. I don't remember one,
Okay.
which I guess is a good sign.
Yeah.
There were moments where like we would get hot, like the scout team would get hot, and they'd get like pretty pissed. But that's more like pissed at like themselves rather than any one of us. But I'd say we all knew our role, really well. So
I got to ask, when you talk about being on the bench and roles, how scripted are bench performances or bench celebrations, and what exactly are you guys saying over there while the game's going on? Because clearly you're jazzed up when you guys are winning. You're jazzed up when good things are happening. You probably got some ish faces when things are getting sideways. But what's that like? What's the dialogue? What's the tenor? What are you guys saying while the team's in a huddle? What are you guys saying when things are good and things are bad? Just give us your best example of what may have transpired while you're over there on the bench in your sweats.
Yeah, it's a good question. Just about everything that you could imagine happened at the end of the bench. I'll start with sort of the celebrations. Honestly, I prided myself on being up and at them and being really energetic at the end of the bench, jumping up and down, basically looking like an idiot at the end of the bench. But it was an art, like sometimes we would have group celebrations where, Dewey, Rob, and I would like, we called one the artillery, where like we would each have like a different, like Dewey had like an RPG, and I was like,
this is why we had to do this show, because this is the stuff that nobody's getting.
Yeah. So like I would whip out like the 3-pointer guns and like Dewey whip out like an RPG. So that was like one. And then one was like the doves, like after a 3-pointer. So I'm sure you could find some clips. I don't know. But then there were some random ones. There were also some random ones where we would just like start dancing on the sideline. There was one moment where Dewey is like laying face down on the floor in a T-pose on the bench. I have a screenshot. I could probably send it to you. But I thought that was pretty funny because like we would just end up in some pretty crazy celebratory motions, I guess.
Coach ever get pissed off when you guys were maybe getting a little too into it?
Not from a celebration standpoint, but I'll give you one moment. This isn't in the book. But there was one moment where we were playing at the Jumpman Invitational in Charlotte my senior year, and we were playing Michigan. And there's a moment where Caleb gets into it with their point guard. I forget who the point guard was. And they start jawing at each other. And the guys on the floor, obviously, like start walking towards the huddle to like break it up. But it was also an under 12. I think it was the under 12 media timeout. Mm-hmm. So usually those under whatever minute media timeouts, like we're running out there to like give high fives, hype them
Yeah,
up.
you're
But we
dapping your guys
know,
up. I get it.
yeah, and we know it's a dead ball at the correct minute. So we're running out there. And I guess Coach Davis thought Dewey and I were running to go fight the point. We were not even aware that the scrap, and it wasn't really a scrap, but like we weren't aware of the conflict down there. And we just go running to half court. And by the time we get to half court, Coach Davis is like, get back, get back. I'm like, okay, like I didn't know what was going on. I'd say that was the only time that it was like a border. I mean, again, we were not aware of the scrap going on, but that was sort of the
Yeah.
only time I can remember.
So let's talk about some of, I guess, the highlights of you, being, a varsity player, but having that unique experience, that unique perspective of being a walk on. Um, you know, the Biscuit Boys becomes a thing after your free throw against NC State. Michael Jordan's in the house. That's enough for most people to write a book about just that one instance. But is there pressure when you're walking up to the line there, or do you just know it's happening, and you just kind of go through the motions? Because that's not normal when you've been sitting for most of the game, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, people care because they want to save 59 cents on an extra sausage biscuit. Like that's pressure, man. That's real life just grinding on you. How does that go, and how does that play out in your mind?
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure that I felt. And quickly to your point about being sort of cold for 2 hours, like I think that's sort of an underappreciated fact. Like we've, for the most part, been
Especially as a
sitting.
shooter, dude. That's
Yes,
impossible.
exactly. Exactly. We've been sitting there for 2 hours. We had, I guess you have the 5-minute shoot around after halftime, barely. So you sort of come in cold off the bench, but honestly, the adrenaline really gets you going. It's actually funny. Mondo, I remember Dewey told me this story. Mondo called Dewey, I think it was last year when he was playing in the G League or in the NBA Summer League, and he was coming off the bench in a very similar manner, like at the end of the
Mm.
game. And he was talking to Dewey like, I don't see how you guys did it, coming off the bench and like doing anything. But yeah, I mean, having the minute or so of play in that state game leading up to the free throw helped sort of get the blood pumping. But walking up to that line, I was so nervous. And to be completely honest, I knew I was missing the first one. There was no doubt in my mind. I was so nervous.
Well, it just is a lot working against you, dude.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't even concerned with Biscuits. It was more so like Michael Jordan's right over there. That was the main thought. But after I missed the first free throw, I knew I was going to make the second one. Like it was a really weird sort of switch up of feelings, but as soon as I got that miss out, I was like, there's no way I'm missing this one. So, that was a really cool moment. And like you said, it was sort of a dream within a dream, like hitting a free throw. I know the game was already decided, but hitting a free throw under pressure like that in front of MJ against a rival with a sold out afternoon Saturday crowd. It was
And
definitely
more importantly, breakfast sandwiches are on the line, right? That's when you reach cult status, is because you're getting a bunch of fans, some extra sausage for their drive to work the next day. What's crazy is you mentioned Jordan being in the house. He would never, give you any flowers for making that free throw, but he absolutely is petty enough that he would have given you shit had you missed both of them. Like he would have sought you out and said something about it. And then you've got an entirely different story to tell, right?
Yeah. Then I don't. Maybe I write a book about letting Jordan down. But
That time that I broke Michael Jordan's heart in a blowout of our rival.
Yeah. Well, the next day I was like, God, like, what if I had missed that one? Like, why would I be hated around the state of North Carolina? Like, who knows?
So, and I totally glossed over this. Do you remember the first game that you got in, and what were the butterflies like there?
Yeah. So I remember getting in the exhibition game like before my junior year, and that was, I mean, the jitters were going there. But honestly, when we came in, like the nerves sort of disappear, but the adrenaline makes you like black out almost. It was hard to remember some moments, but it's funny. And this is one of the lessons that I talk about in the book. Like when we were in that exhibition game, we're blowing the other team out, right? And there's maybe 20 seconds left on the clock. I sort of forget. We're passing the ball around, and then I catch it at the top of the key. I mean, sort of near half court. And I was just going to stand there with the ball and let the clock run out because I don't know, we're beating a team by like 40. Like like sports. We
There's
want
no
to be
script here.
sportsmanlike. Yeah, but then I look over at the bench, and Coach Davis is doing the circle, like just play, and then the rest of the bench is doing it. So I'm like, okay, let's make something happen. End up like driving in and losing the ball, but from that moment on, I was like, okay, that means like whenever we're in, no matter what the score is or the time, like we're gonna go try and get a bucket. So then the first time I checked into the game, like a real game, was against Elon, and I think it was like December or something, and I got the rebound on a free throw and slipped and fell, looked like an idiot. And then I was running back down the floor and caught the ball. And again, like thinking back to what I did last time, I was like, okay, I'm going to make something happen this time. Caught it, just drove as hard as I could towards the rim. And I saw Dewey sort of flash on the other side of the paint as his defender rotated to me. And I just slipped the ball by his head to Dewey for a layup. So, coming in like that first game and like contributing to the stat line, at least with a rebound and an assist. I think my per 40-minute stats were going crazy. But yeah, that was a really special moment, and getting to run out there and like feel the energy from the crowd was insane.
So that season gave you a lot of insane moments, right? I think all UNC fans remember what that run was like, coming back and beating Duke, for Coach K's retirement party, and then making that run to New Orleans. Help folks understand your biggest moment from that stretch run, because it started with the Coach K, deification in Cameron, and you guys stole something. What was something you remember from either that game or the post game celebration? Because that doesn't happen for anybody else, and you were part of that.
Yeah, and that's again part of why I wrote this book. Like not only my own personal journey getting there, but then this magical run that happens, a few months into me making the team. And I think what really started the run was beating Coach K and Duke at Cameron. I think anybody who followed Carolina at all that year knew that we had a pretty up and down season. We'd go on a 4 or 5 game winning streak, win a few big ones, and then, lose a dud at home. And then we obviously had gotten blown out by Duke at home by like 20 a month earlier. So I think going into Cameron was special, but nobody thought we were going to win except us. And we were unranked. They were number 4 with, I think their whole lineup was going to get drafted. Obviously had Ben Caro.
Yeah, I mean they were loaded, dude.
Yeah, and then that on top of Coach K's last year, his last game at home, all of that hoopla was sort of building up all week. But we truly thought that we were going to walk in there and stun them, which we did. But I'd say there was one moment in particular. We're hanging around throughout the first half, and then RJ hits a big time 3 as the first half buzzer expires to cut it to 3. It was either 2 or 3, and in the locker room, we're all pretty jazzed up because we know we're playing well. We've put ourselves in a position to win, and Coach Lebo, walks up to the front, and usually all the coaches will say something at halftime, and he's like, this is exactly where we want to be on the road. Down 2 on the road, it's exactly where we want to be. As soon as they give up the lead, they're going to fold. And we come out in the second half and essentially punch them in the mouth and get a small lead, but then they come roaring back, and then it's sort of a tug of war the rest of the game, but eventually we pull it out. And in those final minutes, as we realize, like, okay, we just like had the upset of potentially, the century. It was special. Like it was hard to believe also, because I've never heard Cameron so quiet and stunned.
Yeah.
Because it is an intimidating place to play. And like, even if you get a small lead, as soon as they make another basket, it is roaring. Your ears feel like they've ruptured. But in those last few minutes, it was quiet and people were crying, and it was beautiful.
When did it become real to you guys, right? Because you've heard some of the other players talk about that specific game, but again, you've got a very unique perspective, and I love that you talked about how quiet it got in there. When did it finally hit you that, oh, this is really happening? So I've heard people point to a specific play in the game, but for you, when was that?
For me, it was Mondo's dunk when Caleb dumped
Hmm.
it off to him, because you never want to start thinking you've won too early, especially with a team like Duke at Cameron. But even though we had stretched that lead out a bit, I think it really hit me when they were trying to foul Caleb, left the lane wide open, and he dropped it off to Mondo for an iconic photo. That was essentially the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
I remember when that happened, I was like, okay, we're like having fun playing, but also we're having
Hmm.
fun playing against one of the best teams in the country. And I think in that moment, that's when I realized, like, okay, we really just did this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. So you guys parlay that into an NCAA tournament berth and run, right? 8 seed, nothing given there. But um, tell me, before you get to the Final Four, give me one thing you remember about the first part, and you can't say cowboy hats.
Yeah, the cowboy hats were good. Okay, I'd say, and I think this is sort of out there, but in the Sweet 16, we are playing UCLA. Obviously, another blue blood, very well respected team, well respected coach, and they had a few NBA guys on their team as well. And we were actually supposed to play them earlier in the year, but they had gotten COVID or something, and we had
Hmm.
ended up playing Kentucky and gotten waxed by them. So we were sort of supposed to play UCLA beforehand. So we eventually played them in the Sweet 16, and it is just a dogfight of a game. Nobody can really hit shots. It's very defensive oriented. A 3-point lead felt like a 10-point lead. And Caleb Love, obviously a great player, all conference. He cemented a legacy for himself, obviously at UNC, but also Arizona. But he was struggling. He had really been part of the reason why we had so much success, not only against Duke at Cameron, but also in the opening rounds. And he was really struggling that first half against UCLA. And he was wearing, I think all tournament, he had been wearing these Jordan 11s, just a different
Hmm.
colorway every year or every game. And he was wearing these like black
Here's we're in the
11,
midnights.
yeah, with like a purple accent. And clearly they weren't working. And at halftime, we're sitting there. It's pretty quiet because we knew we hadn't played up to our potential. And Hoots, the director of basketball ops, walks up to him with his Pantone 11s, the baby blue version that he had a lot of success in. And he asked Caleb pretty quietly, and I'm standing like right behind Caleb, and he's like, "You want these?" And he sort of like drops them right next to him, and Caleb's like, "Nah." But then Hoots it was not a question; it was more of a
It's like,
statement.
no, no, you're putting these on.
Yeah, and so Hoots walks away, and I see Caleb sort of looking at them, and then about a minute later, he starts unlacing his midnight ones, and puts on the Pantones, and I think he scored 28 of 30
He got
or so.
unconscious real quick.
Yeah, something like that in the second half, and he hit two huge threes at the end of regulation to pull out the win. But I think that moment was like a power of superstition moment that I sort of appreciated in the moment, because I was like I was begging him in my mind to change shoes.
I think they were called the cap and gowns, but I remember, yeah, I said midnights earlier. I think they were called the cap and gowns, but yes. And actually that became a fun little aside and a storyline for us who were covering the team at the time. All right, so you guys make it to the Final Four again. The Baylor to UCLA to St. Peter's, and then you end up with, oh great, here comes the rematch against Duke. Surely they're going to be mad or whatever. And damn if it doesn't happen again. We've talked about the Caleb Love shot, but as somebody who was in New Orleans for that, um, and remembered just the power of what that night was like. You tell me, what was that night like from a guy who had lived out his fandom and you've now been a part of the biggest, you know, battle of the Titans on the biggest stage, and y'all come out on top. Script that, please, because that's some Disney-esque stuff right there. You tell me what you remember from that night. Going into it, the win, the crowd coming out of it, the celebration, because that's the type of stuff. Again, that could have been a book on its own. And we're talking with Jackson Watkins on his new book, Dream On From Backyard to Biscuits, a Tar Heel basketball tale. So, Jackson, tell me about that, because that's some, all right, grandson, come sit on my knee type stuff.
It truly was. And again, I keep going back to this idea, and it is sort of an overarching theme of the book, but it was straight out of a fairy tale. Like, you could not have scripted a better path to the Final Four. But also, once you get to the Final Four, it's yet another fairy tale within another fairy tale. And I think the whole tournament, we had sort of had Duke in the back of our mind because we knew they were on the same side of our bracket. As we advanced each round, we saw them advancing each round. And as soon as we found out, we were going to be playing them, it just sort of felt like the perfect storm where, okay, they crushed us at home. We upset them on the road. It's like the tiebreaker of all tiebreakers, essentially. And then you also have the dynamic of, like, arguably the greatest coach of all time on his way out. You have Coach Davis coming in, reaching the Final Four in his first year. The other teams in the Final Four were all blue bloods. So it was Carolina, Duke, Kansas, Villanova. And you just couldn't have scripted it any better. And truly, in that week, I guess it was about a full week leading up to the game, I tried to stay away from, like, social media and watching TV because it was basically everything. That's all anybody was talking
Yeah.
about. And I'd say it's not like we treated it like any other game because we sort of knew the implications, but I'd say in the preparation and the process leading up to it, it really was like business as usual, I'd say, because we knew we were capable of beating the team because we had just done it like a month ago. We knew we were playing to our fullest potential over the last few weeks. And we knew that we were going to have to play pretty damn well to have a chance at beating them again. So we were, again, pretty confident going into it. But what I remember the most was the gravity of the situation, like right after we get back from shoot around that morning. So, like, it's a Saturday night game. We go to the Superdome that morning to do pregame shoot around. And when we get back, I make the mistake of turning on the TV, and it immediately goes to ESPN, and there are two analysts talking in the Superdome, an hour, we were just there like an hour ago. And it really hits me, like, the gravity of this game. And part of the trouble in writing this book was, like, having to put the feelings into words because
Yeah.
I struggle with articulating exactly how it felt. Like, it felt like the world was going to end. It felt apocalyptic in a way where, like, the rivalry, it was sort of like all-time bragging rights one way or another. And I'm just glad it went our way. But truly going into the game, it was like, it's about to go down in the biggest way possible. And then the game itself lived up to every hype there was, which is really rare, I find. Like, a lot of times you'll have a game or a rivalry just hyped up sort of over the fence. But I think, and this is also in the book, but, like, the first 9 or 10 field goals were either a dunk or a three from both sides. It was just like heavyweight punches.
Haymaker after haymaker. Yeah.
Yes. And, it's pretty rare, that you get a basketball game like that in the Final Four, let alone UNC Duke. So there were a lot of things that went right for us that night. Obviously, they were a super talented team. And, that final shot that Caleb hit was essentially the dagger, I'd say, because it was so close. I've watched that shot so many times, as I'm sure a lot of people have. Like, I don't see how he got it over Mark Williams because he's a 7-footer, fully outstretched, and somehow it gets by his hand and it went in. But the energy was crazy after he made that.
This is something I feel like I have to ask for everybody who, from a fan's perspective, you get the heart racing, the blood pressure, the butterflies, all of that stuff happens. Dude, you're on the bench when this goes down. How do you keep yourself from getting too hype or getting, or getting too nuts? Because that's one of the things that's the difference between a player and a fan is you guys are invested for all of the reasons. Fans are invested because they want something to happen. Like, what's the difference there? What's the mindset to keep you from totally losing your stuff, as a member of the team?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this is actually hopefully going to be a funny response. So I actually was not on the bench, like on the
You
actual
were sitting
bench.
behind them.
I was right behind the
You
bench
drew the
because
short straw for that game.
yeah, so exactly. This was and I talk a little bit about this, but it's sort of a walk-on thing where the NCAA has a certain limit on the number of bench chairs that you can have during the
That's the
NCAA
most
tournament.
NCAA thing ever, right? Like I will go
Yeah.
ahead and tell you, folks that follow me on social but listen to me when I host the shows. I I, I can't remember anything the NCAA has done right in 20 years, and this is another example of the fact. Oh, you mean to tell me that we can't find one more bench chair for these guys who have sweat and bled all season long? Sure, whatever. Please go ahead, sir. I will give you all of the soapbox space to rail against that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate, but it's not a novel thing. Like we actually started like a JV to walk on reunion every year, so we'll have a game where
That's
we'll
awesome.
get guys, yeah, from like the '90s, the 2000s. We'll all get guys who started on JV and eventually walked on, and we were sharing stories about that one time about drawing straws, and I remember JB Tanner. I think it was JB. He ended up on the front page of the Daily Tar Heel because he had not drawn the short stick for the '09 Natty. So he was like on the front page of the newspaper while the other walk-ons were, behind the bench, a little bit behind them. But that was a good moment. But yeah, it was nothing new. And Rob and I, given we were the new guys, we were, behind the bench for the NCAA tournament. And honestly, being on the bench, no matter how precarious the situation felt, for some reason I felt more calm and like relaxed because I always felt like we could sort of pull it out. And maybe it was
Mm,
because I felt more connected and had an impact on the game or influence.
sure.
But for some reason, when I was, one row behind, it felt completely different. So I was pretty nervous like during that Duke game. And I was like following all the superstition, habits that I could. Like I was trying to keep my butt in the chair because every
Uh-huh.
time I stood up, we missed. Like all of those things until Caleb hit that shot. It was actually funny because I guess we're up by one at that point. The whole stadium is standing. Our whole section is standing. The bench in front of me is standing, and I can't really see because I want to keep my butt on the bench.
Right.
So I'm like weaving in between people, like trying to get a clear view of Caleb, and I see him sort of come off and disappear, and then I sort of alter my view, and I see him just rising up to shoot that shot. And it seemed to me like it happened in slow motion, but as soon as it went in, I was like, okay, I can stand up now, and I just shoot up behind the bench. So I remember like thinking that in the moment, like I really want to stand right now, but I can't risk it.
My butt cheeks are now free. Thank you, Caleb. You're able
Yes,
to get up
yes,
off the bench. All right,
yeah.
so Jackson, I've already taken an hour of your time, man. So I want to try to get a couple more things that I know are really important to you, and they're very very strong, big time pieces of the book. So I want to make sure we talk about it. Um, the JV team going away, right? I think a lot of folks who understand what the JV program at Carolina means are probably, I guess, downhearted about this. As somebody who used and contributed to the JV program, and it was such a big part of your life, tell me what you feel when you hear about this thing going away, and what it means for guys like you that probably won't have that opportunity in the future.
Yeah, it's really sad. That's probably the best way I could put it. Like it was instrumental in making my dream happen. Um, so I also am lucky in that sense, and I'm always thankful for the timing of sort of my journey. But it really is sad that it's going away, and not just for the varsity pipeline piece, but I came in as a freshman. I was the only kid from my grade from my high school to come to Carolina. Didn't know as many people. Was obviously sort of saying goodbye to competitive basketball for that moment. And coming in, like making the JV team was like a new family. It introduced me to, fellow freshmen who I end up graduating with, but also upperclassmen who, became mentors to me, and I never would have became friends with them, if I had to guess, if it wasn't for the JV program. So I think having that team early on in college was super sort of instrumental in my freshman year experience. And beyond that, it really gave me an outlet to sort of practice those things that are really important to me, like work ethic and patience. I think that's a big one. Discipline, sacrifice. It was a lot of time that we spent practicing. So that was definitely sacrifice. But the time management piece, communication, all those components that you sort of miss when you're not playing a sport, I think it brought to sort of the average Carolina student. So I think it really is sad. It's just a shame that, incoming guys like me who might have been able to play in college and could have been exploring the JV option, like won't have that as an opportunity. But I think it is sort of just reflective of the broader changing era that we're in college athletics.
Yeah, there definitely been some seismic shifts just since you first got to college that have changed the way the sport is, but college sports as a whole. I know you're still young in your career, but what can you say that you've already been able to take away from your professional life that you learned as a part of Carolina basketball or as a part of going through the JV program and then being a walk on? Has there been a big aha moment that you felt already and you're like, man, I absolutely learned this from my experience as a ball player?
Yeah, I mean, it's not there's not many like huge moments yet, but I think they're all the sort of small moments and the soft skills that really translate. A lot of the traits I just mentioned about like being able to work in a team, being able to work extremely hard, those things are important no matter what you're doing. I think another one is being coachable. You know, Playing for a bunch of different coaches, a bunch of different teams throughout my life, you really understand how to take feedback in a constructive manner. Obviously, different coaches have different ways of giving you feedback, but I think understanding that even if it seems harsh, it's in your best interest and in the team's best interest, and that at the end of the day, it's coming from a spot of love. Like that is actually probably an underrated point that I didn't realize until I sort of got into my career a little bit and started to realize like not everybody has that sort of, I guess, tough skin, you could call it, but that coachability. And then I'd also say, I'd say this is one of the biggest aha moments. Like my senior year, I started against Duke on senior night, which was super nerve wracking, as you can imagine. And that whole week leading up to it, I was so nervous. But I
Yeah, but you
gained the
guys had
moment.
you got to wear such sick throwbacks though, man.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet, yeah, but as soon as the ball was tipped and everything, like, all the nerves disappeared because I knew I could lean on my preparation. I knew I had played my entire life to get to this moment, um, and so then I just went out there and did as good of a job as I could. I think the nerves leading up to that moment have translated to, like, whether it's an interview or a presentation or something, a client call or whatnot, like those moments where I might have previously gotten like super nervous for, I sort of remind myself, okay, like if I can go walk out in front of 22,000 and millions at home, like I can do this. As trivial as
No,
that
man.
may sound, like,
No,
yeah.
it's absolutely, and perseverance is a hell of a drug, right? I would ask you, have you ever thought about what things might look like if you hadn't stayed on your path, or what if one of those really really tough practices, or when things were hard, what if you had decided to kind of bail on all this? Where do you think things would have gone?
Yeah, I try not to think about it. But I think that sort of describes my mentality, even since high school, like skipping reps, skipping a workout, skipping a run. I mean, you could even apply it to academics, like skipping homework or, not putting in this extra hour of prep or study. It was always that what if that honestly scared me. It was a little bit of fear of like, will I regret this? Will I regret trading some near term gratification for long term success? I think that fueled me a lot, and I think basketball is sort of the medium that I learned that through the best, especially when it came to working hard in the weight room, working out outside of practice, preparing for games, stuff like that. I think that's part of why I got to where I got was by having that perseverance sort of instilled in me early. And I think that's something that I can carry forward too.
I love that. I think there's a lot about that. I think grown people struggle to understand that short term satisfaction versus long term gain or long term prosperity. I know, as a parent, it's hard for me to get my kids to understand of what it's like to buy into the process. So the fact that you were able to get your arms around that, at 18, 19, 20 years old, is serving you well and probably will continue. But it also gave you some really awesome moments to be a part of. Before we get out of here, tell me more about the Add More Athletes initiative. 'Cause I think that's something really fascinating that is a byproduct of what's going on right now and a reaction to what's going on right now with the change in college sports.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually recently listening to a podcast from the president of IMG and one of the seniors at Weatherford Capital, and I'm not as well versed as I probably should be, but they were essentially talking about a potential college initiative where you're basically adding more athletes to the program. Now we have NCAA roster caps across a lot of sports, and that impacts basketball by limiting rosters to 15. So given I was, part of the guys who made my roster like 17, I think, I could potentially not have played if that cap was instilled. But I think what they're basically saying is like sports is such a key element of the college experience. Like um, schools with more teams, more athletes tend to have better outcomes, higher GPAs, stuff like that. And regardless of where you see college athletics going from like a professional versus amateur level, like having more athletes in the system, whether it's like true varsity programs or like a JV/farm program, I think that benefits the system all the same. And I think like some people are not maybe ignoring. I don't know if people are straight up ignoring it, but like I think one underappreciated impact is like the impact to high school seniors, because coaches can go pick up a transfer a transfer from a different college that has been
Yeah.
playing for a couple years. They're physically probably bigger, stronger, faster, and I think like high school seniors probably aren't getting picked up as much. So I think what their initiative is essentially trying to do is think about how can we add teams or JV teams across sports to get tuition paying students, at these schools, but still have an outlet to play sports, which is beneficial for all involved.
That'll be fascinating to follow. Last question. All right. Jackson Watkins has joined us for a little over an hour now talking about his book and his experience. The book's called Dream On: From Backyard to Biscuits, a Tar Heel Basketball Tale. It is now available for pre-order on Shopify. We will have that link available in the details of not only the YouTube show, but in the podcast feed as well. Jackson, if there's one thing you could tell somebody who is, who is considering buying this book, what's the one thing you want them to take away from it?
I want them to take away the ability to chase a dream is super important, and to never give up on that dream. I was lucky enough to have my childhood dream come true. It definitely took a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance, and certainly a level of luck. But I think what I hope this book tells is, truly magical stuff can happen if you never give up and you keep chasing it, whether it's playing basketball or a job or a different sport, whatever it is. There is so much merit, and you learn so much along the journey of chasing that dream, regardless of if it happens or not, that it's going to be worth it, nonetheless. So I'd say that's my main message.
Man, what a takeaway. And I do want to say that, when Disney comes calling, just remember me. I'd love to get a producer's credit or something like that. But Jackson Watkins, man, what a story. I'm so glad you've had a chance to kind of put this into writing. Can't wait to get my hands on a copy of the book. I think it's going to be really, really good. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to or watching this show, you're clearly the target market. Get your hands on a copy. Make sure that even if they don't arrive before Christmas, you can tell, or you can give a little printed out, hey, this is what you're getting version for that Tar Heel in your life. But really grateful for Jackson spending some time with us here and kind of telling the story and giving folks a little bit of pre-order excitement for the book. But Jackson, man, thanks so much. I appreciate it. This has been fun. I hope you sell a ton of books. I hope that we can hear, maybe in 3 or 4 years there's an addition to or an abridged version where maybe you've had to go back and add in a chapter or two.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I'll get you a signed copy to add to your collection back there. But
Love it.
really
Love it.
appreciate it. Go Heels
Yeah.
as always.
All right. That's Jackson Watkins. I'm Joey Powell. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt for sponsoring this here show. They sponsor all the content here on Inside Carolina. Hope that you all have a great evening, great afternoon, great morning, whenever you're listening to this. We're just glad that you made us a part of your rotation. Until next time, for Inside Carolina, I'm Joey Powell. Y'all make it a great week.